My name is Delia, and at 28, I never imagined my generous gift would become my biggest regret. For an entire year, I saved every spare dollar from my marketing manager's salary to surprise my mother with a luxury beach resort vacation. 8 separate rooms, ocean views, all expenses paid. $5,800 that represented countless overtime hours and skipped lunches. Then my stepfather Warren dropped his bombshell despite everything I paid for. I would be sharing a room with my teenage step-siblings. The separate room I had specifically reserved and paid for. Suddenly not mine anymore. Before I tell you how my dream vacation turned into a nightmare, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if family drama feels all too familiar to you. Growing up, it was always just Mom and me against the world. My father passed away when I was only 4 years old, leaving my mother, Linda, to raise me on her own. Those early years weren't easy financially, but the bond between us grew unbreakably strong. We might not have had much in terms of material possessions, but the love and support we gave each other made up for everything we lacked. My mother worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads and food on our table. Despite her exhaustion, she never missed my school events or forgot to help me with homework. Watching her sacrifice so much for me instilled a deep sense of determination. I promised myself that one day I would be able to give back to her everything she had given to me. That drive pushed me through high school, where I graduated as valedictorian, earning a partial scholarship to college. Even with the scholarship, I still needed to work part-time at a local coffee shop to cover the remaining tuition and living expenses. Those years were tough, balancing classes, work, and internships, but I kept my eye on the future. My marketing degree finally paid off when I landed an entry-level position at a respected firm in the city. My career was just taking off when my mother met Warren 6 years ago. I was 22, then finally finding my footing in the professional world. Mom had been alone for so long that I was genuinely happy when she started dating again. She deserved companionship after all those years of focusing solely on me. Warren seemed perfect at first. Successful, attentive, and apparently crazy about my mom. Their courtship moved quickly, surprisingly quickly in retrospect. Within 8 months of their first date, they were married in a small ceremony at the local country club. I remember feeling a mixture of happiness for my mom and unease at the whirlwind romance. Something about Warren struck me as too polished, too perfect, but I pushed those feelings aside. If he made my mother happy, that was what mattered. Along with Warren came his 2 children from a previous marriage, Zach, who was 17, and Mia, 15. I tried my best to welcome them into our family. I bought thoughtful gifts, suggested family outings, and made genuine attempts to get to know them. But from the beginning, they kept their distance, treating me with a mixture of indifference and disdain. "We already have a sister," Zach told me bluntly during one of my earliest attempts to connect. "We don't need another one, especially one who's practically old enough to be our mom." Despite their rejection, I kept trying. I remembered how difficult it had been when my own father died and thought perhaps they were still processing their parents' divorce. Patience and understanding would eventually win them over, I believed. What I didn't anticipate was how Warren would gradually insert himself between my mother and me. What started as small things like interrupting our phone calls or rescheduling our mother-daughter brunches evolved into something more concerning. He had opinions about my career choices, my apartment location, even the men I dated, and increasingly, my mother deferred to his judgment. "Warren thinks you should reconsider that promotion if it means more travel," she would say. Or, "Warren says that neighborhood isn't safe for a single woman." His influence grew while my voice in family matters diminished. Still, I held on to the special connection I shared with my mother. Despite Warren's presence, we maintained our traditions when possible. And as my career advanced and my financial situation improved, I began dreaming of giving her something special, something she had never been able to give herself, a luxury vacation. Growing up, our vacations had consisted of weekend trips to nearby lakes or occasional visits to relatives. My mother had always talked about wanting to see the ocean from a beachfront hotel room, sipping coffee on a private balcony as the sun rose. That image stayed with me, and as my 31st birthday approached, I decided to make it reality. I spent months researching the perfect destination, a spectacular beachfront resort known for its impeccable service and breathtaking views. I opened a separate savings account and diverted a significant portion of each paycheck into it. I cut back on expenses, brought lunch from home, and picked up freelance marketing projects on the weekends. Every dollar saved brought me closer to giving my mother the experience she deserved. After a year of dedicated saving, I had enough for a wonderful week-long stay for 2 at the resort, including separate rooms to give us both privacy and space. I wanted this to be perfect, a chance for my mother to be pampered and relaxed, and also an opportunity for us to reconnect without Warren's constant presence. The more Warren inserted himself into our relationship, the more I found myself missing the easy companionship my mother and I had once shared. This vacation would be a chance to reclaim some of that closeness, I thought. Little did I know how dramatically my plans would be derailed. The big reveal came on my mother's 50th birthday. I created a beautiful gift box containing a brochure from the resort confirmation of our booking and a handwritten note explaining that this was my way of thanking her for all the sacrifices she had made for me growing up. When she opened it, her reaction was everything I had hoped for. Tears filled her eyes as she leafed through the glossy pages showing the pristine beaches and elegant rooms. "Delia," she whispered, "this is too much. I can't believe you did this for me." I hugged her tightly, savoring the moment. "You deserve it, Mom. All those years you gave me everything. Now it's my turn to give something back." Warren, who had been watching silently from across the room, finally spoke up. "Well, isn't this generous? When exactly were you planning this little getaway?" There was something in his tone that dimmed the joy of the moment, a subtle undercurrent of disapproval that made me tense up. "It's for next month," I explained, keeping my voice light. I checked Mom's schedule with her assistant to make sure she had no conflicting appointments. "Next month?" Warren repeated, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "That's our anniversary month, Linda. Did you forget?" My mother's face fell slightly. "Oh, I didn't realize the dates would conflict." "They don't," I quickly clarified. "I specifically booked after your anniversary weekend." Warren nodded slowly. "Very thoughtful, though it seems a shame to split up the family. Zach and Mia have been talking about wanting a beach trip this summer." And there it was, the subtle pressure, the implication that my gift was somehow lacking because it didn't include the entire family. I watched my mother's expression shift from pure joy to uncertainty, and I knew what was coming next. "Delia, would it be possible? Would you mind if Warren and the kids joined us?" my mother asked hesitantly. "It would be wonderful to have everyone together." Every part of me wanted to say no. This trip was meant to be for us a special mother-daughter experience, but seeing the hopeful look on her face, I couldn't bring myself to refuse. "Of course they can come," I said, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. "The more the merrier." Warren's smile widened. "That's very generous of you, Delia. We appreciate being included." What had started as a 2-person vacation suddenly expanded to 5, which meant I needed to adjust the booking and stretch my budget significantly. Instead of 2 rooms, I now needed 3, one for my mother and Warren, one for Zach and Mia, and one for myself. The cost nearly doubled, requiring me to dip into my emergency savings, but I was committed to making this work. As the vacation date approached, my initial disappointment gave way to renewed excitement. Perhaps this could be an opportunity to improve my relationship with my step-siblings. In a relaxed setting away from everyday tensions, maybe we could finally find some common ground. I took my mother shopping for vacation essentials, and for brief moments, it felt like old times. We laughed, as she tried on sun hats and debated the merits of different sunscreens. When Warren wasn't around, she seemed more relaxed, more like the mother I remembered. "I haven't seen the ocean since my honeymoon with your father," she confided as we browsed through sundresses. "I can't believe we're finally going back after all these years." Those moments reinforced my determination to make this vacation special, despite the changes to my original plan. But even during our shopping trips, Warren's influence was present. He called frequently, questioning our purchases and offering unsolicited advice. As the departure date grew closer, Warren began taking over aspects of the planning without consulting me. He rearranged some of our dinner reservations' scheduled activities without checking if everyone was interested, and repeatedly questioned my choice of resort. "Are you sure this place is worth what you're paying?" he asked during a family dinner the week before our trip. "My buddy Jim went to a place in Myrtle Beach that was half the price." "This resort has exceptional reviews," I replied, trying to keep the irritation out of my voice. "And it has exactly the amenities Mom has always dreamed of." Warren shrugged. "Just seems excessive to have so much space. Do we really need separate rooms? It's not like we're spending much time in them anyway." That was the first warning sign, the first hint that he might try to change the arrangements I had so carefully made. I was quick to respond. "The rooms are already booked and paid for," I said firmly. "Everything is set." My mother, sensing the tension, quickly changed the subject. But I should have recognized then what Warren was planning. I should have been prepared for what was coming. The final days before the trip were filled with packing and last-minute preparations. Despite my concerns about Warren's comments, I allowed myself to feel excited again. The resort looked more beautiful in each photo I saw, and I couldn't wait to see my mother's face when we arrived. The night before our departure, I could hardly sleep. After all the planning, saving, and adjustment, we were finally going on the vacation of my mother's dreams. I had no idea that within 24 hours, that dream would turn into something entirely different. Our arrival at the beachfront resort was everything I had imagined. The grand entrance with its soaring ceilings and massive windows overlooking the ocean took our breath away. Palm trees swayed in the gentle breeze, and the sound of waves breaking on the shore created a perfect vacation soundtrack. "Oh my goodness!" my mother gasped, clutching my arm. "Delia, this is absolutely beautiful!" Even Zach and Mia seemed impressed momentarily, forgetting their usual teenage indifference as they gazed at the infinity pool visible through the lobby windows. Warren nodded approvingly as he surveyed the elegant surroundings, though I noticed him checking the expensive watches and designer outfits of the other guests with a slightly calculating expression. A friendly staff member approached with welcome drinks, non-alcoholic fruit cocktails served in real coconut shells. "Welcome to Paradise Shores Resort. My name is Thomas and I'll be assisting with your check-in. Who is the reservation holder?" "That would be me," I said, stepping forward with my ID and credit card ready. "Delia Jackson." Thomas tapped efficiently on his tablet. "Ah, yes, Ms. Jackson. I have your reservation right here. 3 rooms, ocean view, 7-night stay. Is that correct?" "Yes, that's right," I confirmed, feeling a flutter of excitement. After a year of planning and saving, we were finally here. "Perfect. Your rooms are all ready. We've placed them on the same floor as requested." Thomas handed me 3 key cards in elegant folded paper holders. "Room 814 for yourself, 816 for Mr. and Mrs. Griffin, and 818 for the younger guests." I turned to distribute the keys, but Warren intercepted, taking all 3 from my hand. "Let me see those for a minute." A small frown creased my forehead, but I said nothing as he examined the room assignments. What happened next sent a shockwave through my carefully constructed plans. "Actually," Warren announced loudly, "we're going to change the arrangements a bit. Delia will be sharing with Zach and Mia. Linda and I will take the single room." I stared at him in disbelief, certain I had misheard. "Excuse me." "It makes more sense this way." Warren continued smoothly, addressing Thomas rather than me. No need for a young woman to have a room all to herself when the kids have plenty of space. We're trying to build family bonds on this trip. The blood rushed to my face as I struggled to process what was happening. Warren, that's not the plan. I specifically booked and paid for 3 separate rooms, including a private room for myself. Warren's expression hardened slightly, though his smile remained fixed in place. Plans change, Delia. It's practical. We're saving a room this way. Saving a room? The rooms are already paid for, I said, my voice rising slightly. All of them. By me. Thomas shifted uncomfortably, clearly recognizing the brewing conflict. Perhaps I should give you folks a moment to discuss. There's nothing to discuss, Warren interrupted. Family vacations require flexibility. Delia needs to understand that. I turned to my mother, expecting her to intervene to point out the obvious injustice of the situation. Instead, she looked down at her hands, her earlier joy replaced by a familiar discomfort I had seen too many times when Warren made unilateral decisions. Mom, I said quietly, this isn't right. She glanced up briefly. Maybe it would be nice for you to spend some time with Zach and Mia. You could get to know each other better. Her words felt like a betrayal, especially given that I had spent years trying to connect with my step-siblings only to be consistently rebuffed. And now, on the vacation I had planned and paid for, I was expected to give up my privacy and personal space. This is ridiculous, I said, no longer caring who heard. I saved for a year to make this trip happen. I paid for separate rooms because I wanted everyone to have their own space, including me. Warren's face darkened. After everything we've done for you over the years, you're going to make a scene over room arrangements. This is exactly why people find you difficult, Delia. Done for me? I repeated incredulously. What exactly have you done for me, Warren? We've included you in every family holiday, every celebration, he shot back. We've given you advice on your career, your dating life. Unsolicited advice I never asked for. The frustration of years began pouring out. And now you're trying to take over the vacation that I planned and paid for. Zach and Mia stood to the side, Zach looking bored by the argument, while Mia watched with a slightly smug expression. Several other guests in the lobby had stopped to observe the unfolding drama, adding to my humiliation. Thomas cleared his throat. If I may, we do have additional rooms available if you'd prefer to book another. That won't be necessary, Warren cut in. Delia is just being dramatic. She'll be fine sharing with the kids. It's not like she hasn't shared a room before. The condescension in his tone pushed me over the edge. This isn't about whether I can share a room. This is about respect. I spent thousands of dollars on this vacation specifically booking separate rooms for everyone, and you think you can just override my decisions. Warren leaned in, lowering his voice to a level only I could hear. Listen to me very carefully. You're embarrassing your mother in front of all these people. Is that what you want? To ruin her vacation before it even starts, over a room assignment. I looked at my mother, who was now blinking back tears, clearly mortified by the public argument. The sight of her distress cut through my anger, replacing it with a familiar sense of resignation. Once again, keeping the peace would fall to me regardless of what was fair. Fine, I said, my voice flat. I'll share with Zach and Mia. Warren immediately brightened, patting my shoulder condescendingly. That's the spirit. Family first, right? He turned to Thomas. We'll take the keys now. As Thomas redistributed the key cards according to Warren's instructions, I felt a hollowness spreading through my chest. The vacation I had dreamed of giving my mother was already transforming into something entirely different, and we hadn't even been at the resort for an hour. Unable to bear the triumphant look on Warren's face or the pitying glances from onlookers, I muttered something about needing some air and walked swiftly through the lobby doors. The beautiful beach that had seemed so welcoming just moments ago now blurred through unshed tears. as I headed down to the shoreline, needing distance and time to collect myself. This was supposed to be a dream vacation. Instead, it was quickly becoming a nightmare. The sand was still warm beneath my bare feet. As I walked along the shoreline, waves occasionally rushing up to cool my toes, before retreating back into the vast ocean. The beach should have been soothing, but all I could feel was a storm of emotions raging inside me. Anger, humiliation, and an overwhelming sense of powerlessness crashed against each other like the waves against the shore. I found a relatively secluded spot and sank down onto the sand, wrapping my arms around my knees as I stared out at the horizon. For the first time since the lobby confrontation, I allowed the tears to fall hot streaks down my cheeks that I wiped away roughly with the back of my hand. How had I let this happen? Why did I continue to put myself in situations where Warren could undermine and disrespect me? This pattern had been playing out for years, and somehow I kept expecting different results. I thought back to the first Thanksgiving after Mom and Warren got married. I had prepared traditional recipes passed down from my grandmother dishes my mother and I had made together every year. But when we arrived at their new house, Warren had hired a caterer, completely replacing our family traditions without discussion. "We're creating new traditions now," he had said when I questioned him. "Blending our families means leaving some old habits behind." Then there was my 30th birthday, when my mother had planned a surprise party at my favorite restaurant. Somehow, Warren had convinced her to change venues at the last minute to a place he preferred inviting his clients without asking me. What should have been an intimate celebration with close friends became a networking event for his business. The vacation room switch was just the latest in a long string of incidents where Warren exerted control subtly or not so subtly, pushing me to the periphery of my own relationship with my mother. And my mother, whether out of love for him or fear of conflict, consistently chose to accommodate him rather than stand up for me or herself. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, I realized I couldn't avoid the room situation forever. With a heavy sigh, I stood, brushed the sand from my clothes, and made my way back to the resort. The room that should have been my private sanctuary for the week was now a chaotic mess of teenage belongings. Zach and Mia had already claimed the 2 queen beds, leaving a rollaway cot in the corner that the hotel staff must have brought in while I was gone. My carefully packed suitcase had been haphazardly placed beside the cot, while Zach's gaming equipment dominated the desk, and Mia's makeup and hair products covered the entire bathroom counter. The room that should have comfortably accommodated 2 people now felt cramped with 3, especially given the teenagers' apparent inability to contain their possessions to their own spaces. "Oh, you're back," Mia said without looking up from her phone as I entered the room. "Dad said you went for a walk to cool off." The casual way she referenced my forced retreat made my jaw clench, but I managed a neutral response. "Yes, the beach is beautiful." Zach sprawled across one of the beds with his gaming headset on, didn't even acknowledge my presence. I moved toward my suitcase, intending to organize my things as best I could in the limited space I'd been allocated, only to discover that someone had already opened it. "Did either of you go through my suitcase?" I asked, noticing that my carefully folded clothes were now jumbled. Mia glanced up briefly. "I was looking for a phone charger. Mine broke." "You could have asked," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "My things are private." She shrugged. "We're family, right? Isn't that what Dad keeps saying?" The irony of her using Warren's family rhetoric to justify invasion of privacy wasn't lost on me. For years, Warren had selectively deployed the "we're family" argument whenever it served his purposes while simultaneously maintaining clear boundaries around his own privacy and possessions. That first evening set the tone for what would become an increasingly tense vacation. Privacy became a luxury I no longer had access to. Getting ready in the mornings involved navigating around Mia's extensive beauty routine, which somehow required every inch of counter space. Evenings meant enduring Zach's loud gaming sessions, complete with animated commentary to his online friends. When I tried to establish some basic boundaries, suggesting we create a bathroom schedule, or asking Zach to use headphones after 9 p.m., my reasonable requests were met with eye rolls and complaints to Warren, who inevitably took their side. "Their kids enjoying their vacation," he said dismissively when I approached him about the situation. "Don't be so uptight, Delia." The daily activities, which I had researched and planned with such care, were now completely controlled by Warren. He rearranged our scheduled snorkeling tour without consulting me, canceled the sunset cruise I had booked for my mother because he thought it was overpriced, and added golf outings that only he and Zach participated in, while the rest of us were expected to entertain ourselves. My mother, who had been so excited about the vacation initially, now seemed constantly anxious, her eyes darting to Warren before she agreed to any suggestion I made. The special mother-daughter time I had envisioned never materialized, as Warren always seemed to insert himself between us, redirecting conversations and monopolizing her attention. I tried repeatedly to get my mother alone, hoping for just a few hours where we could connect like we used to. But Warren was always there, his arm possessively around her shoulders, his opinions dominating every discussion. By the third day, the strain was showing on all of us. My mother's smiles seemed force the tension around her eyes visible whenever Warren and I were in the same space. Zach and Mia, emboldened by their father's example, became increasingly dismissive of my presence and property. I discovered Mia using my expensive face serum without permission. Zach borrowed my laptop to download games when his tablet ran out of battery. When I returned to the room one afternoon, I found my work files had been moved on the laptop, indicating someone had been browsing through my professional documents. Each violation was met with the same excuses: "We're sharing," or "It's not a big deal," or my personal favorite, "If you didn't want people to use it, you shouldn't have brought it." That evening, I overheard a conversation that confirmed my worst suspicions about how my stepfamily viewed me. I was returning from a solo walk on the beach, approaching the resort's outdoor dining area, where Warren sat with Zach and Mia when their voices carried to me on the evening breeze. "Delia's being such a princess about everything," Warren was saying. "You'd think someone who works in marketing would understand the concept of sharing." "She freaked out just because I moved some files on her laptop," Zach added with a laugh. "Like, chill out, it's just a computer." "Well, she did pay for everything," Mia said, surprising me slightly with what sounded like a small defense. Warren's response crushed that momentary hope. "And she hasn't let us forget it for a second. That's the problem with Delia. She thinks money buys her the right to control everything. But this is a family vacation, and in this family, I make the decisions." I froze in the shadows, their words confirming what I had suspected, but hadn't wanted to believe in Warren's mind. My financial contribution entitled me to nothing, not even basic respect for my property or preferences. The vacation I had sacrificed to provide had been completely co-opted, my role reduced to that of a reluctant financier for Warren's vision of a family trip. Fighting back tears for what felt like the 100th time that week, I retreated to the beach rather than confront them. But something was shifting inside me with each new disappointment, each fresh disrespect. The resignation that had become my default response to Warren's behavior was hardening into something else, a determination that had been dormant for too long. I just didn't know yet what form that determination would take, or what would finally push me to act on it. The next morning dawned clear and beautiful, but I barely noticed the stunning sunrise visible from our balcony. I had spent most of the night tossing and turning on the uncomfortable rollaway cot, my mind racing with thoughts of confrontation and escape. By the time Zach and Mia began stirring, I had already showered and dressed, hoping to have a few peaceful moments to myself before the day's chaos began. I reached for my camera, an expensive DSLR, I had purchased specifically for this trip to capture memories with my mother. It wasn't in its usual spot in my camera bag. Frowning, I searched through my belongings, growing increasingly concerned as the camera failed to materialize. "Mia," I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, "have you seen my camera?" She glanced up from her phone with a dismissive shrug. "Zach took it to the beach, said something about wanting to film the waves." My heart sank. My camera, worth nearly $1,000 and containing all the photos I had taken so far, was in the hands of a teenager who had repeatedly shown no respect for my property. And he had taken it without even asking. "When did he leave?" I asked, already moving toward the door. Like an hour ago, I wasn't really paying attention. I rushed down to the beach, scanning the shoreline for any sign of Zach. After nearly 20 minutes of searching, I spotted him with a group of teenagers he had met at the resort, my camera dangling carelessly from his hand as they took turns photographing each other, performing jumps in the shallow water. "Zach," I called, struggling to maintain my composure as I approached. "That's my camera. You didn't ask permission to take it." He turned an expression of exaggerated innocence on his face. "Oh, hey, Delia. Yeah, I borrowed it. Mine doesn't have a good zoom." "You didn't borrow it," I corrected him, holding out my hand. "Borrowing implies asking permission. You took it without asking." Rolling his eyes, he reluctantly handed over the camera. "Whatever. It's not like you were using it." As I examined the camera, my heart sank further. The lens had specks of sand around the edges, and there was a new scratch on the body that hadn't been there before. When I tried to power it on, the screen remained dark. "What did you do to it?" I asked, the anger finally breaking through my carefully maintained facade. "Nothing," Zach protested, though he had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Maybe the battery died." "The battery was fully charged last night," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "And there's sand all over it. This is a precision instrument, not a beach toy." One of Zach's new friends snickered, and something inside me snapped. The camera represented more than just an expensive possession. It was a symbol of all the ways I had been disrespected throughout this vacation, all the boundaries that had been crossed without consequence. "This is completely unacceptable," I said, no longer caring who heard. "Do you have any idea how much this camera costs? How irreplaceable the photos on it are?" Zach's expression hardened into the sullen mask I knew well. "It's just a camera. Stop being so dramatic." "Just a camera," I repeated incredulously. "Just like it's just my laptop you used without permission. Just my toiletries?" Mia helps herself too. "Just the vacation I paid thousands of dollars for, that's been completely taken over by your father." The mention of Warren seemed to trigger Zach's defensive reflexes. "Don't talk about my dad like that. He was right about you being selfish." Selfish? The word hit me like a slap. I saved for a year to pay for this entire vacation. I specifically booked separate rooms so everyone would be comfortable. I researched activities that everyone would enjoy. And I've spent the entire time being treated like an unwelcome intruder in a trip that I funded. By now, our argument had attracted attention from nearby beachgoers, but I was beyond caring about public scenes. Years of accumulated frustration were finally boiling over, and there was no stopping the flood. "Where is your father?" I demanded. "I think it's time we had a real conversation about what's been happening here." "He and Linda are at breakfast," Zach muttered, clearly uncomfortable with my newfound assertiveness. Without another word, I turned and headed back toward the resort-damaged camera clutched in my hand like evidence in a trial. Zach trailed behind, his earlier bravado diminished by the realization that real consequences might finally be forthcoming. I found Warren and my mother at the outdoor breakfast terrace enjoying mimosas and the elaborate breakfast buffet. The sight of them relaxing while my property was being damaged sent another surge of anger through me. "We need to talk," I announced, placing the camera on the table between them. Now. Warren's expression shifted from surprise to annoyance. Delia, we're in the middle of breakfast. Whatever it is can wait. No, it can't, I replied firmly. Zach took my camera without permission and brought it to the beach. It's now damaged, possibly beyond repair. My mother's eyes widened as she looked from the camera to Zach, who had slunk into a chair at the far end of the table. Oh, Zach, you shouldn't have taken Delia's things without asking. Warren waved a dismissive hand. I'm sure it's just a little sand, nothing to get worked up about. It won't turn on, I said flatly. And that's not the point. This is about respect, Warren, something that has been completely lacking on this entire trip. Warren's face darkened, the pleasant mask he maintained in public slipping to reveal the controlling personality beneath. If you're going to make another scene, perhaps we should take this back to the room. No, I said, surprising even myself with my refusal. I've been silent too long. This stops now. Taking a deep breath, I laid out everything that had been building over the past few days, the room reassignment that stripped me of privacy, the constant invasion of my personal space and belongings, Warren's complete takeover of the vacation itinerary, and the dismissive attitude toward my feelings and contributions. I saved for an entire year to make this trip happen. I concluded, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. I wanted to give Mom something special, something she's always dreamed of. Instead, it's turned into a showcase for how little my feelings and boundaries matter in this family. Warren's response was predictable. You're overreacting as usual. This is exactly why you're still single, Delia. You make mountains out of molehills and drive people away with your rigid expectations. The personal attack stung, but I refused to be diverted. This isn't about my relationship status. This is about basic respect, something you've never shown me. I turned to my mother, whose face had crumpled into an expression of distress. Mom, you've watched this happen for years. Warren pushes me aside, makes decisions that affect me without my input, treats my feelings as irrelevant. And you say nothing. Her silence now felt more painful than anything Warren could say. She looked down at her hands, unable or unwilling to meet my eyes. I've tried so hard to be part of this family. I continued, my voice finally breaking. I've accepted last-minute changes to plans we made. I've endured Warren's constant criticism of my life choices. I've reached out to Zach and Mia despite their rejection. And for what? To be treated like an ATM for this vacation, and then relegated to a cot in the corner. Mia, who had joined us at some point during my speech, actually looked uncomfortable. Zach studied the table intently, but Warren was unmoved. If you're unhappy with the accommodations, perhaps you should leave, he said coldly. Go back to your perfect apartment and your perfect job, where everything is under your control. The suggestion, meant to be a punishment, suddenly seemed like liberation. Maybe I should, I agreed, straightening my shoulders. Because this isn't a vacation anymore. It's just another opportunity for you to assert control and diminish me. I turned to face all of them, finally delivering the ultimatum I should have issued years ago. Either things change right now, starting with proper respect for my belongings and my privacy, or I'm leaving. And I mean real change, not empty promises followed by more of the same behavior. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother looked up with tears in her eyes. Delia, please don't go. We can work this out. But Warren's expression told me everything I needed to know. There would be no meaningful change, no sudden recognition of his controlling behavior. He might make temporary concessions to keep the peace, but the fundamental disrespect would continue. And in that moment, watching my mother's silent plea while Warren's face remained set in stubborn defiance, I made my decision. For the first time in 6 years, I would prioritize my own well-being over the fragile peace of a family that didn't truly value me. I'll be checking out this afternoon, I said quietly. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. As I walked away from the table, leaving behind my broken camera and broken expectations, I felt a curious mixture of pain and relief. The vacation I had dreamed of giving my mother was over for me. But perhaps something more important was beginning my journey towards setting boundaries that would finally be respected. The decision to leave felt both terrifying and liberating as I returned to the room to pack my belongings. My hands trembled slightly as I folded clothes and gathered toiletries, the reality of what I was doing sinking in. I was walking away from the vacation I had saved for and planned meticulously. More than that, I was taking a stand that would inevitably change my relationship with my mother and step-family forever. I had just zipped my suitcase closed when there was a soft knock at the door. My mother stood in the hallway, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. I stepped aside to let her in, noticing how she wrung her hands together, a nervous habit from as far back as I could remember. "You don't have to leave," she began, perching on the edge of the bed. "I spoke to Warren, and he agrees that Zach was wrong to take your camera without permission." "This isn't just about the camera, Mom," I said gently, sitting beside her. "It's about a pattern that's been going on for years. Warren makes decisions that affect me without any consideration for my feelings. He dismisses my concerns, criticizes my choices, and you never say anything." She flinched at my words, but didn't deny them. "Warren can be strong-willed," she admitted. "But he loves me, Delia. He takes care of me." "I know he does," I acknowledged. "But Mom, at what cost? You've changed since marrying him. The mother I knew would never have let someone treat her daughter the way Warren treats me." Tears welled in her eyes again. "I don't know how to make everyone happy. When I stand up to Warren, he gets so angry. Not violent," she quickly added, seeing my expression. "But he can make life very difficult. It's easier to just go along." Her admission broke my heart, but also confirmed what I had suspected for a long time. My mother was caught in a relationship dynamic where keeping peace with Warren took precedence over everything else, including her relationship with me. "I understand that it's complicated," I said, taking her hand. "But I can't keep participating in a family system that requires me to accept disrespect as normal. I won't do it anymore, Mom. I love you too much to watch you shrink yourself to accommodate Warren's need for control." "What will you do?" she asked, squeezing my hand. "I've booked a room at a smaller hotel down the beach," I explained. "I'm going to salvage what I can of this vacation on my own terms." "Will I see you before we leave?" The vulnerability in her question reminded me of the strong, loving mother she had been before Warren. "Of course," I promised. "But I need some space right now. And I think you need time to think about what kind of relationship you want us to have going forward." She nodded, slowly wiping away tears. "I'm sorry, Delia. I never meant for things to turn out this way." I hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume. "I know, Mom. I know." Our conversation was interrupted by Warren's voice from the hallway. "Linda, are you in there? The kids want to go to the pool." The way my mother immediately tensed spoke volumes about their relationship dynamic. I squeezed her hand one last time before letting go. "You should go," I said softly. "Think about what I said." After she left, I finished gathering my belongings and headed to the front desk to check out. The sympathetic hotel manager, who had apparently witnessed the lobby confrontation on our arrival day, offered a partial refund for my unused nights. "Family vacations can be complicated," he said kindly as he processed my checkout. "We have a sister property about a mile down the beach, smaller but very peaceful. I've taken the liberty of calling ahead if you're interested." His unexpected kindness brought fresh tears to my eyes. Thank you. That would be perfect. Before leaving, I made one final stop at my mother and Warren's room. Warren opened the door, his expression guarded. I'm checking out, I said, simply holding out an envelope. These are the remaining vouchers for the activities I prepaid. The reservations are all in my name, but the hotel manager has transferred them to yours. Warren took the envelope, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Perhaps he had expected more argument or dramatics. This is the last time I'll let you disrespect me, Warren, I continued calmly. When we get home, things will be different. I won't be coming to Sunday dinners or family events where my feelings and boundaries aren't respected. I won't be financing any more family activities that you'll take over and control. And I won't pretend anymore that your behavior is acceptable. He began to respond likely with another dismissive comment or criticism, but I cut him off. I don't need your approval or understanding. I'm simply informing you of my decision. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the doorway. The smaller hotel recommended by the manager was indeed peaceful, a boutique property with a fraction of the guests of the larger resort. My room, while not as luxurious as the one I had originally booked, had a charming balcony overlooking a quiet stretch of beach. Most importantly, it was mine alone, a sanctuary where I could decompress and process the emotional whirlwind of the past few days. That first night alone was bittersweet. I ordered room service, took a long bath in a tub that wasn't cluttered with teenage beauty products, and sat on my balcony watching the stars without having to endure Zach's loud gaming or Warren's opinions. The silence felt both lonely and healing. The next morning, I received a text from an old college friend, Amanda, who coincidentally lived in the area. Seeing my social media post about being at the beach, she reached out to suggest meeting for coffee. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Over lattes at a beachside cafe, I poured out the entire story. Amanda listened without judgment, occasionally asking insightful questions that helped me see the situation with new clarity. It sounds like a classic case of control and emotional manipulation, she observed. Warren has systematically isolated your mother and trained everyone, including you, to prioritize his preferences above all else. Hearing someone else articulate the dynamic I had felt but struggled to name was oddly validating. I've tried so hard to make it work, I admitted, but nothing I do is ever enough. Amanda reached across the table to squeeze my hand. That's because the goalposts keep moving, Delia. People like Warren don't want resolution or harmony. They want control. And you've been threatening that control by maintaining an independent relationship with your mother. Her perspective helped me see that the vacation drama wasn't an isolated incident, but the inevitable culmination of years of boundary violations. For the first time, instead of feeling guilty about ruining the family vacation, I felt justified in my decision to leave. With Amanda's encouragement, I began to reframe the remainder of my time at the beach. Instead of a failed family vacation, it became a turning point, an opportunity to reclaim my autonomy and establish healthier boundaries. I signed up for a sunrise yoga class on the beach, took a solo kayaking tour of the coastline, and spent peaceful hours reading under a beach umbrella, activities I would never have been able to enjoy under Warren's controlled itinerary. 3 days into my solitary stay, I received an unexpected text from Mia. Can we talk? I'm at the beach cafe near your hotel. Surprised and slightly wary, I agreed to meet her. I found her sitting alone at a corner table, nervously stirring an iced tea. How did you know where I was staying? I asked as I sat down. She looked embarrassed. I heard Dad and Linda talking. They mentioned the name of your hotel. I nodded, waiting for her to explain why she had sought me out. What you said about respect and boundaries, she began hesitantly. It made me think about how we've been treating you. how I've been treating you." Her unexpected self-awareness caught me off guard. In all our years as stepsisters, this was perhaps the most genuine interaction we'd ever had. "Dad's always told us that family means sharing everything, that private property is selfish," she continued. "But he doesn't apply that rule to his own stuff. No one's allowed to touch his golf clubs or use his laptop." I couldn't hide my surprise at her insight. "You've noticed that double standard." She nodded, looking down at her drink. "After you left, I started paying attention to how he talks to Linda, too. The way he interrupts her or makes decisions without asking. It's the same way he treats you." Our conversation lasted nearly 2 hours, covering ground we had never explored in 6 years of being step-siblings. Mia shared her perspective on her parents' divorce, her initial resentment toward my mother and me, and her growing awareness that her father's behavior wasn't always healthy or fair. "I'm not saying everything's going to change overnight," she said as we prepared to leave. "Zach still thinks you overreacted about the camera. And Dad, well, Dad isn't going to admit he was wrong." "I don't expect miracles," I assured her. "But this conversation means a lot to me, Mia." She hesitated, then hugged me quickly before hurrying away, a small gesture that carried enormous significance. Perhaps the dramatic end to our family vacation had planted seeds of awareness that would eventually grow into something more positive. On my final day at the beach, I arranged to meet my mother for coffee at a neutral location, a quiet cafe midway between our respective hotels. She arrived looking both nervous and relieved to see me, pulling me into a tight hug before we sat down. "You look rested," she observed. "The smaller hotel must be nice." "It is," I confirmed. "Peaceful. How's the rest of your vacation been?" She hesitated, clearly weighing her words. "Different. Warren's been quieter since you left, less demanding about the schedule." I nodded, not surprised that my departure had shifted the family dynamic in ways both obvious and subtle. "And how are you feeling about everything?" "Conflicted," she admitted, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup. "I hate that you felt you had to leave. I hate that I didn't do more to prevent it. But I also understand why you made that choice." This was more self-awareness than she had shown in years, and it gave me hope that perhaps my dramatic stand had created space for her to reflect on her own situation. "I've been thinking a lot about our relationship, Mom," I said gently. "About how it's changed since you married Warren, and about what I need going forward." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I know I've let you down, Delia. I've chosen peace with Warren over standing up for you too many times." "It's not about keeping score," I assured her. "But yes, that's been painful, and it can't continue if we want to have a healthy relationship." What followed was perhaps the most honest conversation we'd had since Warren entered our lives. I outlined clear boundaries for future interactions, explaining that I would no longer participate in family gatherings where my autonomy wasn't respected, nor would I contribute financially to events where I had no say in the planning. "I'm not cutting you out of my life," I emphasized. "I'm just changing the terms of our relationship to protect my own well-being." She listened without interrupting, occasionally wiping away tears, but nodding in understanding. "What about Warren and the kids? Will you still see them?" "That depends on them," I said honestly. "I had an interesting conversation with Mia yesterday. She sought me out to talk, which has never happened before, so perhaps there's hope for change there." "And Warren?" she asked hesitantly. "Warren will need to demonstrate genuine respect for my boundaries before I'm comfortable spending time with him again," I said firmly. "I can't control his behavior, but I can control my response to it. And I won't tolerate being dismissed or controlled anymore." My mother reached across the table to take my hand. "I'm going to do better, Delia. I can't promise I'll get it right immediately, but I'm going to try. You deserve that." Her words weren't a magical solution to years of complex family dynamics, but they represented a beginning, a small step toward a healthier relationship. As we parted with promises to meet for lunch when we both returned home, I felt cautiously optimistic that something positive might emerge from the vacation disaster. The journey home and the weeks that followed were a period of adjustment and realignment. True to my word, I created distance from Warren and the step-siblings, declining the first few Sunday dinner invitations with polite but firm explanations about needing time and space. I focused on rebuilding my independent relationship with my mother, scheduling lunch dates and movies, just the two of us recreating the closeness we had shared before Warren. At first, he attempted to insert himself into these plans, but my mother, in a small but significant act of assertion, began telling him, "This is just for Delia and me." Recognizing that the family issues had taken an emotional toll, I also began seeing a therapist who specialized in blended family dynamics. The sessions helped me process years of accumulated frustration and develop healthier responses to Warren's controlling behavior. 6 months after the fateful vacation, my mother invited me to a family dinner, assuring me that things would be different. With some trepidation, I accepted, preparing myself for potential conflict, but determined to maintain my boundaries. The change was subtle but unmistakable. When Warren attempted to criticize my recent career move, I calmly stated, "I'm not looking for input on my professional decisions." Instead of his usual escalation, he paused, then changed the subject. Later, when he suggested I should help Zach with college applications, "Since you're so good with words," I replied, "I'd be happy to review his essays if Zach asks me directly. That's his decision to make, not yours." Each time I set a boundary, I watched my mother's reaction from the corner of my eye, half expecting the familiar anxiety and placating behavior. Instead, I saw something new, a quiet pride in my assertiveness. Zach remained somewhat distant, though noticeably less hostile than before. But Mia continued the tentative connection we had begun at the beach, asking about my marketing work and actually listening to my responses without the dismissive attitude that had characterized our earlier interactions. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how much had changed since the disastrous vacation. The experience that had seemed like a complete failure had ultimately become a catalyst for growth and transformation. By refusing to accept disrespect any longer, I had not only reclaimed my own power, but also modeled a different way of interacting for my mother and step-siblings. The price of the vacation had been steep, both financially and emotionally. But the lesson it taught me was invaluable. Respect cannot be purchased with generosity or sacrifice. It must be required as the baseline for any relationship worth maintaining. I had always thought that family meant unconditional acceptance of whatever treatment came my way, that love required endless accommodation of others' needs at the expense of my own. The vacation fiasco taught me otherwise. True family relationships, like all healthy connections, are built on mutual respect, clear boundaries, and honest communication. As difficult as it had been to walk away from the vacation I had planned and paid for, that decision had ultimately given me something far more valuable than a week at a luxury resort. It had given me the courage to stand firm in my worth, to demand the respect I deserved, and to build relationships based on equality rather than control. The beach vacation may not have been the dream experience I had envisioned giving my mother, but in its failure, it had created space for something more meaningful to emerge, a more authentic relationship between us, and a new understanding of what family could and should be. Have you ever had to draw a line with family members who disrespected your boundaries? I would love to hear about your experiences in the comments below. Remember that standing up for yourself is not selfish. It is necessary for healthy relationships. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the price of self-respect may be high, but it is always worth paying.